Well, today on the show, we're focusing on plasma therapy as a way to fight coronavirus. It's an old method of fighting infectious diseases which has resurfaced during the pandemic. Transfusions with convalescent plasma, since the blood of people who've recovered from an infection contains antibodies that have learned to fight the disease. Plasma from recovered people is given to patients who are suffering from the disease. Now, it's being used in different parts of India. Plasma banks have been set up first in Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Mumbai, among other places. So it is being used in a widespread manner. In the US, a study published in the American Journal of Pathology tracked 350 severely ill COVID patients admitted to the Houston Methodist system of 8 hospitals who were then treated with plasma therapy, and the study found it effective. We spoke to Dr. Sachin Goyal from a Houston Methodist hospital on the findings.
So yeah, this is an active, field of active investigation. The initial studies, like any other new drug, when you study something, the first thing is to study the safety. In a small group of patients, any new drug or plasma or anything like that is studied, and the first things you're looking for is whether this is safe to use in humans. So the initial studies have shown that it is safe in a small group of patients. And then the next step is to study safety and efficacy in a larger group of patients. So these are the safety and efficacy data that are being studied, and so far the safety signals appear promising. And based on what I'm reading and what I have heard, the efficacy is also promising. I'm yet to see large manuscripts on convalescent plasma coming out of the United States, but I think some of these manuscripts and analyses are underway, and we should see something in the near future.
All right, to talk more about plasma therapy, we're now joined by Dr. Anjan Trikha, Chairman of Clinical Managerial Group COVID Center from AIIMS. Thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Sandeep Budhiraja, Group Medical Director of Max Healthcare. And Max, of course, was one of the first hospitals that started plasma therapy in Delhi. But first to you, Dr. Trikha, if you can tell us a bit about, the findings in AIIMS. Recently, an interim analysis that was released by AIIMS said that convalescent plasma therapy had not shown a benefit in reducing the mortality risk. If you could explain this to us.
Yeah, we had carried out our own studies, and we had a control group and we had a test group, and our interim analysis shows that it doesn't really show us any benefit as far as mortality benefits are concerned. After having said that, I must also put across to the viewers that whenever efficacy of a treatment modality has to be judged, what is very important is the total number of patients it has been studied in. So our initial study sample was small, basically because the plasma therapy was new. We didn't have facilities to check our antibodies. So once the antibodies are checked and then we give the plasma, it is likely to work better. So it is a bit too early to say whether it works. So that's why we concluded from our interim analysis that it is still not correct to say that it is the wonder bullet and it is the treatment of choice. It continues to be one of the experimental modalities. It is safe, as has already been said before. It is as safe as giving any other blood transfusion to patients. So we'll still have to wait. Maybe Dr. Budhiraja, who's in Max, they would have given much more number of plasma therapies, he would be able to add to this, but I still feel that we need to wait and see all the data coming from all over the world. The initial studies came from China, and it was a non-randomized trial, so all non-randomized trials, you take the results with a pinch of salt.
All right, so Dr. Budhiraja, if you could share your experience with plasma therapy.
Okay, so before I come to our experience at Max, I'd like to add a few points to the two studies which are being quoted. I think if we just have to critique the two studies, more importantly, it's each and every study will add to the piece of information, and ultimately it's a large pool of sample size which will give us a correct information as to the real effectiveness of plasma. So one thing is sure that in terms of safety of plasma, it is a very safe therapy. In fact, there was a study on 20,000 patients on the safety profile, and it showed less than 1% adverse effects, which means it's a very safe therapy. Now coming to the larger question of efficacy. Now this US study which we are quoting of 300 patients, the problem in that study was there was no control arm. And of course, the AIIMS initial pilot, which we are talking about, as Dr. Trikha also says, that the sample size is too small, 30, to really comment definitively on the effectiveness and the mortality benefit. Now, if we come to the experience at Max Healthcare, so we have used plasma in over 550 patients starting April. And of course, we did it in various phases. The first part of the plasma therapy which we used was in collaboration as a study with the DCGI, where we had taken 50 patients and 50 were in the control arm. And subsequent to that, after the June 13th advisory, when Government of India allowed off-label usage of plasma, of course, it became the use of plasma started to increase all over the country. And since that, we have given plasma to over 450, 500 patients. Now, it is too early for me to really come out with the statistical analysis because we are presently in the process of doing that. But what is clearly emerging is as follows. Number one, it is safe. We have not had any major adverse effect of plasma to the patients administered. Number two is clearly what we have seen is it reduces the severity of illness in terms of it reduces the chances of a patient going onto a ventilator. It reduces the need for vasopressors, which is the medicines which are required for patients in shock. Thereby, we are presuming that it will have a mortality benefit. We are yet to come out with that statistical figure. But as we are pooling in larger number of patients, we are clearly seeing a mortality benefit emerging. Once we have a complete analysis done, we'll be coming out officially with that projected figures. But there are many variables which one need to understand. As Dr. Trikha already said, the antibody level of the plasma which we use for the patient. Now, in the earlier part, this kit was not freely available, so not many plasma were actually tested for the level of antibodies they have. And now we are doing that. And we have clearly seen a correlation where the plasma has a higher antibody level, the effectiveness is more. And second most important is the timing of plasma. Earlier, we were giving plasma in a sicker patients. Obviously, the effectiveness was much less. Now we are using plasma at an earlier stage of illness when the patient starts to require more and more oxygen. That's the time when you intervene with multiple treatments, including plasma, and the effectiveness of the combination is definitely much better than waiting for the patient to go downhill and then instituting this treatment.
Right,
so as rightly said, it is not a magic bullet. Combination treatment.
Not a magic bullet. But Dr. Budhiraja, also the point that many make is that when you're using plasma therapy, at the same time you're using lots of other treatments as well. And, so that is also an issue when it comes to knowing exactly how effective the plasma therapy has been or whether it's the other treatments that you're using. And we do know that treatments for COVID have been changing. Yes.
That's exactly. So when we say we do a study where we have a treatment arm and a control arm, you need to understand that in control arm, all other treatments are being given. So if they are supposing 3 drugs, which are standard of care over and above plasma, so in the control arm, we will use remdesivir, steroid, antibiotic, etc. Whereas in the treatment arm, we will use the same 3 things plus add plasma. So that effect of other treatment gets neutralized when you compare the study and the control arm where the rest of the treatments in the 2 arms remain the same. So the confounding effect of other medications gets neutralized if the study is properly conducted.
All right. So Dr. Trikha, what you are saying is that at AIIMS, that study, it's still very preliminary. You wouldn't say categorically that plasma therapy doesn't help. Perhaps it does. Also, if you could, there's been so much change in treatment as a layman, as a non-medical people. People have, first heard of hydroxychloroquine. Then WHO said it wasn't effective. Then remdesivir came into the market. Steroid, dexamethasone is being used, and plasma therapy. So there are a whole, a range of treatments that all of you doctors have been using. And of course, for 6 months, it's all been experimental, and then then you start using more drugs as you find them being more effective, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you're right. Once you use the word experimental, that sends a wrong signal to the citizens of the country. When a disease is new, well, like this COVID disease, the virus is new. One has to go back. One has to see what drugs are likely to be used, likely to be effective, and likely to be safe. So this is what we have been doing, and we are now much more wiser than when the disease came in. We started with steroids, and from day one at the All Nature Medical Sciences, we have been using steroids. We were using methylprednisolone. We still use methylprednisolone, and we know it works. Subsequently, the reports came about dexamethasone. It is a steroid, and some people use it. Some people still use methylprednisolone. Basically, both are steroids. Then came the antivirals. There are so many antivirals available. There are so many antivirals which the drug controller has said yes to it to be used. Remdesivir is one of the things which FDA has also said that it could be used, and we are using it a lot. So we are becoming wiser. We are using various things, antivirals, plasma, then anti-IL-6 drugs, and some more have come in. Some more drug controller has allowed to be used as treatment modalities. So these things do happen when a disease is new and a pandemic strikes us. So there's nothing to get worried. We need to diagnose the case early, use oxygen therapy to the maximum. This is where one thing which we really don't emphasize on. Oxygen therapy given the right way along with steroids can do wonders.